You're listening to Trek FM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
Hello and welcome to your local watering hole. I am just one of your hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and with me, as she is every single week, the one who's lost that love and feeling, Christy Morris.
Yes, hello. We are coming to you from Fightertown, USA. Yes, I said it. It's an awesome place.
It is. It's fantastic.
Do you feel the need for speed?
I do feel the need for speed. I actually feel sorry for everybody who goes to Top Gun these days because it is not in California anymore. It's actually in Nevada. So way less exciting than being by the beach.
Yeah. I vote beach.
Yeah. So Miramar, California, much better place to have Fightertown, USA than Nowheresville, Nevada. So
Reno or something.
Yeah. Anyway, but as you can tell, we're going to be talking about Top Gun. Of course, we were looking forward to the fact and we should have had just right around the corner, Top Gun Maverick that's going to be coming out, but that's pushed till next year. So we figured, we might as well just talk about Top Gun anyway, because why not? And
it all started somewhere.
It's got to start somewhere. That's right. So I'm excited to dive into this one. It had been a while since I had watched it, and I got a chance to check it out on the new 4K, which, whew, man, if you thought Tom Cruise looked good, just wait till you see Tom Cruise in 4K. So, yeah. Tell you what, the volleyball scene, so much better in 4K.
All right. I'll have to get that 4K.
You should. But before we dive into everything, of course, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, hit us up with a star rating and review. Let people know what you think of the show. It's really still the best way to help a show grow is to give it a review over there. But you can subscribe and make sure you get the show wherever you get your podcasts, and then that way you get the show as soon as it drops. You can find us on Twitter at TrekFM. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. You can also find us over at Trek.fm, which is a great place to check out all that we're doing. And then, of course, you can also go to the contact section and you can hit up Christy and I with an email that way. Maybe you've got some ideas of things that you'd like to hear us talk about in the show with, so little movies coming out right now. You never know. So, Christy, I had so much fun watching this movie. And part of that was going back and watching the extras for the movie, as well as doing some reading about the movie, because this is a movie, I don't know about you, but I never knew all the inspirations and the quite the amount of involvement that we got through the U.S. military with the film. But part of that is because this just feels like a movie. I don't know if you feel this way, but I honestly can't remember the first time I saw Top Gun, because it just feels like one of those movies that has been with me forever. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, I was thinking to myself, if someone asked me how many times I have watched it, I really don't know. Probably over 100 throughout my 33 years of life. I mean, I'm probably...
Wow.
Yeah, it's one that's just, like, I'm just going to give it away right out the gate. It's a favorite. I've watched it over and over and over and over and over again. So, yeah, I don't remember the first time either.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that because, normally in many of the shows we do, we kind of talk about our experience with the movie, and it's just like, this is one of those films that just feels like it's been with me forever, and it's not that's not the case, right? Like, I know that that's not true, but yeah, there's just something about it that has just, I haven't lost the love and feeling, but I've just lost the ability to recollect the first time I saw this, but I was really surprised to hear that this article from a magazine called The Californian, it was entitled Top Guns, And that's what inspired Jerry Bruckheimer and his partner Simpson to hire 2 writers to write a draft of this movie, because they thought this article was just so cool. And they thought it would make a great movie, this idea of getting an inside look at, what these guys who become the best fighter pilots that we have go through. And I just thought that was really interesting. Is wow, like it just shows you can get inspiration anywhere. Like you could just be reading a magazine, like somebody in Hollywood. To option a magazine article to make a movie off of, that's crazy.
Right, like you really got to stretch a lot to get from that to having a full script for a movie. So, but it's great that they went about it with that kind of passion from the get-go, because you see that. I mean, it's not just like a documentary that's going to bore you to death. It's showing the excitement as well as the consequences of things that these kind of fighter pilots are doing every day. And so that's really a basis for a good story to stem from. And then they just filled in the gaps.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because, they sent one of the writers down to actually attend some declassified classes at Top Gun, and you got to fly an F-14, and the first draft of the script isn't one that they're, like, super happy with, but they continue working on it and refining it till we get to the one that we know, which I think is really fascinating. But a big part of that, I think, is not just that they, like you said, they don't want to make this a documentary, but they also want the movie to feel real. And for them, they knew that the only way to truly do that was have the U.S. Navy involved in the production of the film. And in many ways, it's their influence that kind of helps create the script, make the changes to make this feel more real. And I just thought, the Navy kind of takes a risk here to say, yes, we want to be involved in this, but they also see the potential, I think, and I was interesting because listening to on this documentary, some of the original Navy guys who are a part of the production, they see the potential of what this movie could do for the Navy and for Navy airmen, and so they take the chance. And their involvement actually really kind of creates the film in many ways that we see, because they help change some things, make it even more realistic in some ways. And they also, I think, just by allowing them to use, they get to use the USS Enterprise. They get to use the fighter planes. Some of the guys that are in the film actually fly in some of these planes. Now, they're not actually flying them, but they're in the cockpit being filmed.
Yeah.
So like all of that, I think, was just really fascinating. It just shows how, you go from the inspiration of this article that's about the real life adventures of these Top Guns to this real life experience of these naval officers helping them forge this. And I think you get something that does feel special. I mean, regardless of, how close some of this is to reality, the movie has a feeling of reality to it.
Yeah, I think that they absolutely couldn't have done it near as well as they did without that level of partnership with the Navy. Because, for one thing, there's a lot of lingo, but I feel like the way that they explain it through showing you in the movie explains it for you without having to give a lot of expositional dialogue. So, for example, I never would have known what the word hard deck meant before. But they explain it through saying, the level was 10,000 feet. You went below it. You broke the rules of engagement. I go, oh, okay. Well, that's what hard deck means then. case closed. But it's cool because they're using it and using it in the right way, that they're just explaining everything to people on the outside of the military, like you and I, to really get a sneak peek of what it might be like to be one of the top guns or be in the Navy. And I think that that's the coolest thing about the whole movie, is that I feel like, well, I don't feel like, there is a lot of things with the military that civilians can't be in on, because intelligence is an important thing to keep close to the chest so that we can protect our country. But it's really cool when you do get to see this glimpse of the things that they do that we don't always get to see.
Yeah. I mean, and what was interesting too is that the Navy does they make some interesting changes. The opening dogfight was supposed to happen in near Cuba. And instead they moved it to international waters to make it a little bit more friendly around the world. And honestly, I mean, you put it up against, Russian MiGs, that doesn't really bother too many people in the world other than Russia. And
Right.
At that point, nobody cared in the United States of that. And then I thought this was really interesting too, because the Navy also helps them. They want to tone down the language, actually. And that, which is interesting to me, that's something they have a problem with. You think of like, war movies or whatever, and guys kind of not having the best mouths or whatever. But this is something, I mean, with the Navy being involved, they want to kind of make this feel a little bit more clean cut. And then I thought one of the smartest things they do too is that, Navy officers are not allowed to fraternize with each other. Officers and enlisted personnel. So they changed, the character of Charlie from, a naval officer to a contractor. So that way there wasn't anything, wrong with them having a relationship. Whether it's the smartest idea is a different story. But yeah,
Right.
they changed that. And I just thought that was really, like, the Navy actually brings in those things again that kind of help make this a more realistic movie to those who would be watching that are in the military. That then to us, it makes it feel, I think, more real, because it is more real. And there's some places we can talk about later where it does diverge from reality. But they definitely worked as hard as possible to make it real, but they never allowed realism to get in the way of telling a good story at the same time. And I think, that's the thing that when you're making a movie, you have to realize is, like, you can't allow reality to get in the way of a good story, because it's a movie.
Right. Be so bogged down in the details that you forget the good stuff.
Yeah. So I just thought that was really great, is that, they give them all of this information, but then in the end, like, this is about trying to create the best story that people are going to enjoy as a movie.
Yeah, and I have to give a shout out to that. I think the number one thing that makes this so believable is the fact that they have the shots of the actual planes, the F-14s and things like that, and the MiGs, and all of the film shots that they did from inside the cockpit. And having them, especially with like the costume design, it wasn't really costume design, like they're all wearing like real uniforms and helmets and stuff. So it feels more real because of those things too, like just seeing them snap on and off their mouth guard thing. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I don't know what you call it either. Cause
their breathing tube.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We'll just call it the breathing tube. Well, and as we kind of mentioned earlier, like, this does pay off huge for the Navy. Like, their recruitment, I think I was listening to the guys, the military guys, and they were talking about that it went up 35-40%. And
I bet.
At the same time, they were apologizing to all of the guys who were now in the military because they thought it was going to be just like this, and then it wasn't. Because the movie even talks about, like, Top Gun is for, like, the top, I think, 1%, they say, like, it's for the very elite, which means that not everybody is going to be the best fighter pilot in the world. You know, like
99% of you won't be.
Exactly.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So I think, that's something that's really interesting. So it does end up being a huge recruitment tool for the Navy. And we talked about this when we talked about Hunt for October. One of the reasons that they got involved with that movie is because they also saw the ability of that to help the submarine community. And so they hoped that it would do the same for the submarine community that this movie did for naval aviation. So, I think one of the reasons that I think people still respond to this movie, as you mentioned earlier, you have the involvement of the Navy in allowing them to film actual planes. And I think that creates such a realism. And we'll talk a little bit later about all of that. But again, their involvement made a huge difference in this movie feeling more real. And I think that's one of the reasons that has continued to be such a success and something that people still go back and watch, because there's something about it that feels more real than just if you knew and you could tell it was just a model all the time.
Yeah, or if it was all filmed on a green screen, where you're just sitting in a cockpit model and you're pretending to fly, it's a lot different than actually having an actor sitting in a real cockpit and filming shots of planes flying for real, and, actually having, even seeing the aircraft carriers. That was something that was really cool for me, and seeing them, taking off and landing off of those. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. So, one of the things, and I'm really glad that I watched the behind the scenes stuff on this, because something I did not know. Obviously, Tom Cruise is a star at this point, but this movie kind of really catapults his career. But I didn't know just how much Tom Cruise made himself a part of every single part of this film beyond just being an actor in it. He legitimately puts into his contract that he's a part of everything. And not so that he can, necessarily be the guy to have an opinion about it all, but it's because he wanted to learn what it meant to make movies from all points of view. And I thought that was really fascinating, because you see here this guy who desires not just to be a movie star, but he wants to be involved in all sides of movies. And I think, this is the thing, to look at how successful he is now with being a producer and the Mission Impossible series and the way he picks movies and everything.
Yep.
You see this man who dedicated himself to learning about the process beyond just him being the best movie star he could be. It was about being the best person in movies that he could be. And I think it just kind of speaks highly to who he is as a person when it comes to his work ethic. And I had so much more respect after hearing that for him. I mean, I know what he's become now and what he does, but to hear that it started all the way back then when he's 21 years old, talk about some foresight as an actor.
Right, and really just going for it, because that's kind of a risky thing, and you may not get what you want when you try to do that.
Yep.
I would say probably a lot of actors don't, but I loved that he really wanted to be already at this point so involved in every aspect, and that this is really when you start to see that Tom Cruise that we get in Mission Impossible, where he's wanting to do his own stunts, where he's wanting to come up with ideas on how to do a shot. I think that it's really evident later when you see then how much he's involved in the making of this movie. So yeah, I think that it's really cool, especially how much he gets into wanting to play a character legitimately in every way he can and making it 360 degrees, I guess is what I would say.
Like a fully fledged character. He wants him to be a rounded character. He doesn't want this flat, boring type of thing. And I think you're absolutely right. You see here the guy who he wants it to be real for the audience because it's real for him, because he's in the moment in the plane, right? And that was also part of the contract. He made sure it was in there, is that he gets to fly in the planes. And so I heartily agree. I think that's one of the things that begins to set him apart as an actor, is that if he's going to film a movie, he wants to be the one filming the movie, not the stunt double. And he knows that reality makes a difference. And honestly, he's right. When Tom Cruise, in Mission Impossible Fallout, jumps out of a plane in a halo jump and he's the one doing it, it elevates that scene.
Oh yeah, because you're suddenly realizing the real danger he was in, and you're going, man, that guy's awesome.
And it's right. It's not fake. Now, a bunch of things in that shot are fake, where they may digitally alter the sky or something like that. But the fact that he's literally falling in the halo jump, all of that's real. That's the stuff that just kind of blows your mind. And I think Tom Cruise is good in the role. Rewatching it, it's been a while since I've seen the movie. I was very impressed with how well he's able to portray all of the emotions that he's required to portray and really make you feel the guy going from this cocky guy to the guy who's not sure he can handle it because of what's happened to him, and the added pressure that he feels with this weight he carries around of the feelings people have about his father, and not necessarily knowing the truth about all of that, but he has to carry around basically the sins of the father, even though we find out his father didn't do anything wrong. He's actually a hero. So it's like all of that stuff. I think Tom Cruise is great. Again, he's a really young actor at this point, but he makes you believe and he makes you pull for the character, because, it can be hard to pull for the character who's just so cocksure and full of themselves.
Oh, yeah.
But he does it in a way that's lovable. And I think, to me, the turning moment is when he's talking to Goose, and Goose comes in and he's like, I got a family, and that moment of realization, I think helps, change things. And it just, again, I think he's, we can make fun of Tom Cruise for different things or whatnot, but I'm constantly impressed when I go back and see his movies, just how well he actually did it in them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think too, I feel like the scene where he's talking to Viper and Viper says, "We have to push it. That's our job." You can see it on both of their faces as well, that they really get across that Maverick is understanding the weight of what goes on up there at this point. That it's no longer just, I'm having a great time and I'm a hot shot and I'm really good at this. He's finally realizing that there are serious implications to doing that job. That it's not all just fun and games, that it's, people's lives are at stake. But by the same token, that Viper says it's kind of a guarantee that you're going to lose people and that you have to find a way to move on from that, and that you don't want to. And it's terribly sad, but it's kind of inevitable with what they do.
Yeah, no, I really like that too. And what I thought was great, and I think it's just kind of a great place to enter in here, is like, I love the way the movie kind of, because you mentioned this in our outline, but the way the movie talks about this idea of why we have rules, and the idea of dealing with loss, and we play those two out with his character specifically, and in the beginning, he is an incredible pilot, but there's a difference between being utterly reckless and being just really good. And there's a recklessness in him that is going to get him into trouble one day. And it almost does a couple of times, and some of his really rash actions get them in trouble, him and Goose, and they could get them kicked out of this program and everything too. So I love the idea of like us realizing that to be the best isn't about breaking all the rules. It's about many times finding a way to bend them without breaking them, right?
Right.
And those people that are the best are usually the ones who are able to do that. Because they even talk about the reason, when they get in trouble about going below the hard deck.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that's the case, it's for their safety. It's not, and this is already a dangerous thing anyway when you're going Mach 2,
Right.
So.
And they say multiple times in a $30 million plane.
Yeah.
One plane, $30 million. So, calm down.
Yeah, seriously. Simmer down now.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest lesson to me. The whole movie is aside from him dealing with loss and learning about that whole lesson of the consequences that could happen of everything he does. But also that there is a reason that the rules exist. There aren't rules of engagement just for funsies, the reason that there's, the rule about not leaving your wingman is because the whole reason you've got one is so that someone is always there to help you out if you have an engine failure or if you get shot down. It's these things so that there's a plan B in place. And repeatedly, Maverick leaves his wingman. And they have to come back and say again, no, there's a reason why we say you never leave your wingman. Because you don't. And, he's the rogue and finds out that maybe there's some things that Iceman is doing right that he could learn from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's, again, not only, there's not only this idea of, learning to play by the rules, but there is also that idea of, not thinking yourself the best so much that you can't learn from other people. And I think, we see him struggle with that specifically, Maverick struggle with that idea of learning from other people and thinking himself so good that he can't learn from anyone else. And there's a danger in that as well, because a lack of humility it can also be a huge detriment. And it can get you into a huge amount of trouble as well. So, I think, all of those things when we're talking about Maverick, his reason for the rules and dealing with the loss that he has and all of these things, I'm still kind of amazed, rewatching the film, how well all of this I think really works in the movie. Because, I think so much of the movie we kind of think of as just being cheesy and everything, and there is some of that, right, with the volleyball scene, which is basically his Tony Scott
for all
the director,
the ladies.
Yeah, he literally just called. He said he was basically shooting softcore porn, with these guys and everything. But again, all of that said, I think the thematic element in watching this character go from one place to another, which is being somebody who's so self-assured, to being somebody who realizes the danger of that, and how to actually kind of move forward as a human being and to grow is good. It's a good story. So I really impressed with it, honestly, especially in the rewatch, because again, it's been a long time since I'd seen this, and sometimes you come back to a movie like this and it just doesn't hold up as much. But with that being the main character story, I think it really does hold up. So what did you coming back into this, what did you think of, Kelly McGillis here as Charlie?
It's weird because this is the only thing I remember ever seeing her in any movie ever. And this, I think, really was the height of her career. But she is so good in this movie. I think that you always feel the weight of her decisions, especially when she says, I was worried everyone in that room could see right through me, because she's got a point. She's there to be an instructor and he's still a student. And yes, even though they are technically allowed to date because she's not an officer in the Navy, it's still more taboo. And she needs to maintain that level of respect as the instructor of the class. So I like that they have her say, like, I still have a job to do. I like you, but I'm not going to sacrifice my career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, why should she?
Yeah.
She needs to keep her. I mean, there does have to be a level of decorum then, and not showing favoritism, right? And so, and I love the way she describes it to him. It's like, yeah, what you said that wasn't necessarily bad or whatever, but the textbook answer and the one that we are here to train people on would then be this, and like, that's why she really gets on him too. And so, yeah, I also think, I love that they chose somebody who's a little bit older than Tom Cruise and had a little bit more of an air of maturity, so that, I think the relationship that she has with Maverick is one in which she is the adult in the relationship and he's still learning how to be a man. And I don't think he's really truly a man until the end of the movie, when he's made his way through losing his friend, coming back out the other side of that, and learning, I think, in some ways, how to control some of that ego. And, I think this movie shows how, Maverick kind of comes off as the classic kind of alpha male, but I think the movie is actually about showing you that's not true manhood, right? And it's interesting because, I think that his relationship with her does a good job of pointing out his flaws, especially when he's just so childish when he comes out and he's revving the motorcycle and she's trying to talk to him, like, the whole scene's really childish, right?
He's pitching a little baby fit.
He pretty much a baby Tom Cruise fit. But then she explains to him and everything, and I think it makes it better. And I just, I think they do a pretty good job with her as a character. And I, you're right on target, because Kelly McGillis had just done Witness. So she was huge because she'd just done Witness with Harrison Ford. And so she was a huge star at that point. And yeah, I think they really made the right choice by not going younger or, she comes off as so glamorous too. She feels kind of like an old Hollywood star. Oh yeah. Which I really liked. The look that they gave her. I mean, she felt like she almost feels like she comes out of one of those like 1940s, 50s movies, like she's Audrey Hepburn, Katharine Hepburn type of feel to her. So all of that I think really works.
Yeah, I think what we're both feeling is she's very poised.
Yes, that's a good word.
As an actress, when she comes in, you feel a presence, especially the scene where she walks out, they're having the class outside and she walks out and is starting to talk for the first time in front of all of them. You can really sense like, oh, she means business. And I like the costuming that they did for her, that even though she's a civilian, she's still wearing more military looking clothing and it's not super feminine. Like she's wearing like the leather jacket or, like a trucker hat, things like that. Still make her look like part of the group, even though she's not technically enlisted.
It's funny you mentioned that hat, because that's a scene that they had to add later on in the cut. They realized they needed some kind of build up, and they also wanted they didn't have it in the movie at the beginning, but they wanted to add a love scene. So they added the elevator scene and then the love scene to kind of like bring their romance full circle there. And by the point they were filming that, she had cut her hair really short.
So they had to cover it up.
So they had to cover it all up and like make it look. So that's why she's wearing the hat in that scene.
But it's perfect.
Yeah. So then she's having, wearing the wig in the scene where they're, kissing and, whatever,
stuff.
All the stuff. So, no, I think she is. I think she does a really good job in the film, and I think it's a good performance on her part too. And I think I think I'm most glad that they chose her because I think you're absolutely right. I love the word you chose, is she has poise. And that's exactly what you want, is somebody who can kind of command the presence of these men, and not just because of what she looks like, but because she can not only speak on their level, but she can one-up most of them. And so that's the thing I really appreciated the most, is like, you know, she's just as smart when it comes to these tactics, and, you know, she's not flying these planes, but she knows what she's talking about inside out. And they never make her feel less than that in the movie, just because she's the love interest. And so I really appreciate that that's the case.
And that scene, too, when they're outside, like I said, and he's telling her for the first time about his interaction with the MiG. That's my favorite scene of the whole movie.
Because I was inverted.
Yeah. Well, what were you doing there? Keeping up foreign relations. You know.
Flying the bird.
You know, like the finger. Yes, I know the finger, Goose.
So, yeah. Can we just mention real quick, like, that is one thing I rewatching this movie, especially I think the first 20 minutes of it, like, it is so snappily written. It's just very, very, very good writing. I am truly impressed with the dialogue and the writing at the beginning of the movie. Like, I think it's really, really sharp. And can't say that for every movie, but this one I thought it was really sharp.
I think it is throughout the whole movie. I mean, the fact that even then at the end, the last line exchanged is a callback to their first meeting.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, I crashed and burned on the first one. So, and she goes, and the second, and he says, I don't know, but it's going good so far.
Yeah.
Hey.
I think one of the characters that kind of gets undersold in the movie, and mainly just because I think Val Kilmer really plays the role of Iceman well. And I think what fascinated me the most about him is how well he plays the fact that, he ends up winning the trophy, even though there isn't a trophy at all at Top Gun. Just
it's a plaque.
It's not even a plaque. There isn't anything. There's no winner or loser at Top Gun.
In real life.
Yeah, in real life, you either pass or you fail. That's it. So basically, you're first or last. So you're either first or last.
No points for second place.
That's no points for second place. Yeah, basically, so you either pass or you fail. And, I think that's something that is... but with the way they do it in the movie and everything, and I thought, to me, the most fascinating thing was the fact that you do have Iceman, and he's definitely good, but you can always tell he actually is second. And I thought that was really fascinating. But part of that is that what I kind of liked about the movie is that he's not all wrong about the problem of Maverick, and I think that was something that, like, you kind of set him up as the quote unquote nemesis of the movie, but he actually has some valid points, and I think that's what makes him so interesting. And I think, he doesn't really have a ton of a good character arc or anything like that, but, Val Kilmer, I think, does everything he can with the role to make it iconic and really make it his own and make it cool, and he does a great job with it. And so, and I like that kind of, that more realism of, like, you come up against these people that you kind of rub off on each other, and sometimes... when that happens, that friction between people, it could be a good thing or a bad thing. And here, I think it ends up turning out to be a good thing for both of them, honestly, right? So I like that as well.
Yeah, like, it kind of reminds me even of, like, the two kids in school that end up being the valedictorian and the salutatorian. They make each other continue to push the other person. And so it does end up in their favor in this situation, because it's like, yeah, even though Iceman doesn't have his own character arc, he's really there to say there's a point to being safe in what you do. But then also not playing it too safe is Maverick's point of like, you still have to be creative and do things to surprise your enemy, because they're always going to be one step ahead of you. So I like that they balance each other in that sense, and that Iceman is really there to hold Maverick accountable for the recklessness and say, look, once again, there's a reason you don't leave your wingman, and hey, I don't like you because you're unsafe. Or no, he says you're dangerous. Yeah.
No, that's a great way to, I mean, I really think that's a great way to put it, is he's there to hold him accountable. And I think he shows the other side, and somebody who's maybe closer to where Maverick should be, you know, especially if Maverick can find a way to just rein in. And again, I think it's some of his ego, right? I think that's really the thing. So, and you know, one of the things that I really love about this movie is Anthony Edwards, because I think he's really the heart and soul of the film, you know, and his relationship obviously with Maverick, and just who he is for Maverick, and the fact that like he's his only family. I think that's really kind of a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think you don't have a story here without Goose, because Anthony Edwards' especially portrayal of him is that he likes to go and be Maverick's wingman and, you know, in and out of the plane and have a good time. But at the end of the day, he has a son, he has a wife, and it's still also a job for him. You know, like he said to Maverick, like you mentioned earlier, it's not just fancy flying for me. Like, I have other people to think about than just myself. And so I love that he brings those moments of responsibility into Maverick's life and reminds him of the things that are at stake for him. And, you know, it's kind of sad that although Maverick says to Goose, "You're my family and I'm not going to let you down," he says it a couple times and then still ends up losing him. And, it, you know, even though it technically wasn't his fault, he feels like it was, because he notices himself now, you know, in hindsight, being reckless.
Yeah. No, there's just something about him that I think, and the thing that I love most about Goose is just how real he is. Like, he's that real person. And I think he's the person that you want, who you would want to be your best friend.
Yeah, like he's a good friend. And here's actually just a cute little tidbit about me, by the way. I had a friend in high school who is now a pilot, not in the military, but just a pilot in general, whose nickname is Goose.
Nice.
And we're still friends on Facebook.
That's cool.
So shout out to Justin. I love you, Goose.
That's awesome. You know, I think I really liked that you had both of these guys in the movie. But I think both Tom Skerritt and Michael Ironside, who play Jester and Viper, were the perfect choices for their roles. They have such authority, but they also have, I think, such warmth to them when they want to. And I think that's the thing to me that really kind of stood out in the movie, was the way in which they both are helping mold these young men and trying to make them the best pilots they can. But you can also tell that they care more, they care just as much about these men's emotional health and who they are and who they're, you know, trying to be and all those things. And they want to make sure that they're putting the best guys in those seats that they possibly can. And so, and I really like really like both of them, and I think it's just again, this movie is I think overall this movie is just so well cast. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think too, you had to have actors with this kind of gravitas that like command respect, that come across like they could be officers in the Navy anyway, to play those roles, especially Viper, because I think that they're really trying to show you Viper is the leader here. He's where the buck stops, and he's got the experience to back it up. But then I like that they add that level of heart and a little more background to him by having the conversation where Maverick comes over to his house, and before graduation, they have that chat, and he says, "I flew with your dad. I knew him, and this could possibly get me fired, but I'm going to tell you what really happened because I think you need to hear it. Your dad did everything right." And it's like Maverick needed to finally reach that point of not feeling like he's always taking the consequences of stuff that his dad did and not even knowing if it's true. But Tom Skerritt is such like a father figure in the role of Viper that it gets all of that across really well. And I just really, really like him. I think you don't get a lot of Michael Ironside as Jester, but what you do get of him is really good. And especially in the scene where, I'm going to bring it up again, but don't leave your wingman. Thank you, Jester.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think both of them do exactly what you need to do. And like you said, I think you picked the perfect word. It's like they have such a presence, such a gravitas on screen that you immediately know they are the authority figures. But there's also this kind of fatherliness to them where it doesn't have to be. They could just be, the hard ass people.
Like they have to be hard on him, but they also care about their guys.
Yes, exactly. It's more than just about, again, it's more than just about making them the best fighter pilots. So I think that they play it so well. To me, the fact that we have real planes and models in this movie, and honestly, I can't tell the difference in 4K is what makes this movie work so well. The fact that all of the effects marry perfectly with the actual footage that they've used, I think is fantastic. And it's even as I was watching this movie with my wife, I was thinking to myself, and I was even saying out loud to her, how did they do this? Because it does feel so realistic. It feels so true to what you think, at least. Like they make it feel real enough that you're like, this has got to be what it's like.
Right? Like there's maybe one scene where I can tell that it seems a little out of place in the first fight with Jester. But otherwise, I would say everything is so seamless. I definitely, when they're doing all of the other fight scenes in the air, like I mentioned earlier, when they're taking off and landing on the aircraft carrier, pretty much everything, the way even that it's edited together, is done so well. I think especially to the last fight where Maverick is taking out the two MiGs that are on Iceman, it's really done well. And I think you're absolutely right that if they hadn't had real planes and then the models when they needed them here and there, that it wouldn't have looked as good as it did. And then especially saying that it looks that good in 4K, I'll take your word for it. But for 1986 to then now look that good, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, they just do such a good job of, with the footage that they shot, with the planes, with the different cameras that they had to create all of these camera mounts because, they don't have GoPros at this point.
Right.
And then the model work that they're doing is really incredible. There are points where they're even using some models from a model shop. And the one of the parts where they're doing the spin, the spin out, that's literally like a toy model that they got at a model shop that's falling towards the camera. And like one of the shots, is actually cuts out right before it hit the camera. You know, like, so the fact that you just can't tell really that what's what shows how hard they really worked on this. And, you know, the only real big inaccuracies in this part of the film is that, you know, with the dogfighting of the planes, because they need the planes to be in the same frame, a lot of this is inaccurate in that way, because that's not necessarily how it all works, you know? It makes it more exciting, but, you know, it still feels real. And I think that's the thing that they realize, too. It's for the story. And this is a place, too, where they really struggled in the edit, where they had to find the story for what was going on in the air with all the footage they shot. And this is one of those movies where everything in the air was pretty much crafted in the editing room. And it just goes to show how important editing is to making something feel right. And they got it right.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah, 100%. Because otherwise the two things don't mesh together at all. I mean, otherwise you have an 80s romance and a Navy documentary.
Exactly. And that's kind of where they were. It's like they were in the edit. They weren't telling a story. And so I think there's a real beauty in that. They found a way to tell the story in the air to drive everything to what they were doing, what was on the ground, you know. And so obviously this movie has an incredible soundtrack, and it's really popular. But I was shocked to learn that Kenny Loggins wasn't going to record Danger Zone. It was supposed to be Toto. Can you imagine?
No. I mean, I love Toto. Africa is one of my favorite songs. But it would have been the total wrong vibe for that song and for this movie.
I mean, it just... I didn't, you know... I had no idea. Like, I was just shocked because you always just think, I mean, Kenny Loggins, Danger Zone, like, this is big. And this is what was so fascinating to me to learn about the soundtrack, is that they had all of these music composers and stuff coming in to write songs specifically for the movie.
Right. Like, it wasn't like they were popular songs before the movie.
Which is crazy and awesome to me. Like, that you're really trying to make this movie and the music fit the movie. And so what was funny to me is that Kenny Loggins wrote the song Playing with the Boys, and he did that specifically because he was thinking, like, this is probably a scene most people aren't going to write a song to. And of course they chose that song for the movie. And then when Toto had to pull out of recording Danger Zone, they asked Kenny Loggins if he wanted to do it, and he's like, yeah. So I just think, like, how crazy that it just kind of fell in his lap to record not only the title song, but one of the most popular songs he's ever done. Like, you know, when you think of Kenny Loggins, to me, I mean, I know he's a folk singer, but I always think of Footloose and Danger Zone.
Oh, yeah. I think of Danger Zone first and foremost. And it fits so well with what they're doing in the movie. Yep. And I don't know, like the vocals too, that's like, to me, quintessential what I love about the 80s even. His vocals on that song remind me of why I love Bryan Adams. You know?
I hear you.
And the guitar, like, and then they reuse some of the guitar riffs later. Oh, it's so good. Like that scene when he's throwing the dog tags into the water. And that...
Well, and that's cool too, because that theme ended up being written before they even started filming the movie. And it obviously became the theme of the movie, and it was something that they were able to like play for each other and get each other pumped up. But yeah, that, that really fit the movie so well to basically, I mean, they talked to the composer about the choices he's making. He was like, I just saw this as basically rock and roll in the air, and so that's who these guys are too. Like they were even talking about, when they were casting the guys and everything, is they, all of these guys you have to be basically a really good athlete to be able to fly these type of planes because of all the G-forces you've got and everything. If you think, car racing is, you got to be an athlete for that. I mean, this is like 3 times that, right? So,
yeah.
And that they really kind of then actually approach the movie almost like a sports movie, where you have the competition, you have the locker room scene. Like they added some of those things in that aren't necessarily quite reality at Top Gun, but to kind of give it that feel. And again, I think that's what helps people kind of latch on to the film, because they already intuitively know what this movie is. Even if it's about guys doing things in planes that you'll never do yourself, you understand what this is, because this is basically an air sports movie.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm glad that you, yeah, I'm glad that you use that phrase though, like rock and roll in the air. Cause I'm like, yes, that totally says what I feel about this movie and like why I romanticize it so much, because that's what I feel whenever I watch it, is like it's constantly got your heartbeat pumping and something cool to look at, as well as this really great emotional story beneath it. So yeah, it's awesome.
So, Christy, I think it's probably going to be pretty low from you, but what would you rate Top Gun?
Well, like you said, maybe pretty low, but no, I'm just kidding. I think I'm going to give it 5 out of 5 sliders, because he's a pretty cool pilot and a great volleyball player.
Slider, you smell.
You stink.
You stink. What? My bad.
Well,
my bad.
The plaque for the alternates
Crash
is down by
burn.
the ladies' room.
Crash and burn.
Did you hear me?
Yes. I heard you about your alternate plaque. I don't need your alternate plaque.
Hey, whose butt did you kiss to get in here?
Well, the list is long and distinguished, but
I'm not going to finish that.
I would say for me, this is a 4 out of 5. I really like this movie. It's so much fun. And I do think one of the keys to this movie is that it does know exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a key to having a movie be pretty good, right? Like, a movie needs to understand what it's trying to be. And I truly think that they were able to find the right tone. They were able to find right everything for this movie. And yeah, it is 4 out of 5 volleyball scenes. So
there you go.
Very good. Now, Christy, before we get out of here, what would you like to recommend to everybody this week?
So, along the lines of this being a movie that I have loved throughout my life, I'm going to recommend one of my other favorite movies. And actually, it kind of fits with the 80s genre as well. But if you haven't seen it, you've probably missed a pretty big part of pop culture. I'm going to recommend Dirty Dancing. And I know it may sound kind of cheesy, but I feel like just like this one, it's something that it's got that emotional depth to it. It's got some really iconic scenes, but then also it can teach you a great lesson about life is not all about who has the most money. And it's a movie that, again, I've watched over and over and over again because it's got that message to it, and not just attractive actors.
Yeah, no, that's great. I have a really strange recommend. So as everything starts to open back up, my recommendation is helping out those businesses around you, that are starting to open back up, so, going, I just happened to be out this weekend and I went to a local coffee shop because they were open. And then I went to Barnes & Noble and I bought a book because it was on sale. And, I just, whether it's large or small, I want people to continue to have jobs. And the only way that's going to happen is if we continue to support them now that especially they're getting back to work. And so, it's a strange recommend because it won't matter in the future, but it's still really important. And it was just great to see, people again out at a coffee shop or, things like that. So, I just, I really, it was great to just interact with people too, and see life slowly get back to a little bit of normalcy. So, I'm excited, and I'm excited because we've got some great things that we're going to be talking about coming up here in the next few weeks. But Christy, if anybody does want to catch up with you and see what's going on, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Bespin Bell. And I also do a couple of other shows in addition to 602 Club. I do a show with my friend Teresa Delgado called Sabers and Spells, which is on the Skywalking Through Neverland network, Skynet. And so we'll actually be talking about some news with Star Wars Celebration, things like that on our next episode, as well as a surprise. So stay tuned for that. I do a show called Planet Leia on the Fantha Tracks network with 5 women from around the world talking about different Star Wars topics. So soon we'll be covering costuming, whether we have enough Funko Pops and other things like that in Star Wars. And lastly, I also do a segment called Fashion in 5 on the Star Wars Report once a month about men's and women's Star Wars fashion.
It's funny you were saying that thing about Funko Pops, and my wife randomly was counting all the Funko Pops that we have in the house, and I think that we have 90 to 100, which is an insane thought. So,
and it doesn't seem like it till you actually do that.
It doesn't. It's anyway. So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Vero under the name MattRushing02. I'm here in the network doing The Orb with Chris Jones. When we get a chance, we talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I'm over on the Nerd Party Network doing 2 shows. One is called Owl Post with Drea Kaufman. We're talking about Harry Potter each and every week, 1 chapter at a time. We're in the Deathly Hallows now. So you can also find me doing Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills. Each and every week, we're diving into a new Star Wars topic, something that's inspired by something we've seen in Star Wars recently, something we've been thinking about Star Wars. It's honestly, if you're a Star Wars fan, it's just so much fun. We're just sitting down talking about Star Wars the way you would with your best buds. And last but not least, do Cinema Stories with my good friend Courtney, where we're talking about films through the lens of faith. And we are hoping to be back now that life is starting to open back up and get back to normal to some regular podcasting. So you can look for that.
Yay.
And but thank you so much for joining us.
And don't lose that love and feeling, you hear?